the bottom of Beis Amud Beis 2b. Okay. Just in brief summary, we say there are four fathers of Nezukin. Shor, an ox, Bor, a pit, Mava, we'll explain what that is soon, and Hever, a fire. Papa says some of them are similar, some of them are not similar. In other words, some of the children of these categories, things that are in the category but not directly related to the father, are like the category, and some are not. So the Gemara explains a good example of something that is similar. So, like we explained yesterday, when we talk about shor or bor, for example, we don't necessarily mean just an ox or just a pit. Let's go specifically to shor. Shor, we said there were three categories in shor. There's Karen, Regel, and Shane. And Karen means the horn, Regel is the feet, Shane is the teeth. But the truth of the matter is that Karen doesn't really mean the horn. Karen is not a category of horn. Karen is a category of intention to do damage. Karen is where an animal deliberately does damage. That's a very good question. So in the case where an animal goes mad and gores with its head, it's very evident, and that's why the father is called Karen. In a case where the animal kicks intentionally, well, it's very hard to determine did it kick intentionally or was it just walking and it kicked, because an animal will often kick as it walks. Now let's go to the next category. Regel. What's regel? Regel is casual damage. Regel is the type of damage that happens anytime you bring an animal too close, in close proximity to glass cups, or pottery, fine pottery. These are things that are
the antiques.
What was that?
Stay out of the antiques.
Yeah, exactly. The regel is the feet, but the feet is just an example of regel. It's the most typical example, which is why we call it the father. Regel is casual damage. It's damage that the animal does sort of as it's walking without intention to do damage. It's just walking down the street. And then Shane is pleasurable. So Shane is teeth. That's literally what it means, because obviously the most pleasurable thing an animal usually does is eat. That's what occupies the overwhelming vast majority of its time. So Shane is where it eats somebody else's food. And but that's not the only example of Shane. We'll see other examples soon. So yesterday we looked at Karen. We said, for example, a typical example of Karen, the father of Karen would be an animal gores with its horns. But we saw other examples also. We saw the animal bit without intention to eat. This is like with horses, this is such a typical stereotype. The horse bit him. The horse wasn't trying to eat when it bit him. Right. The horse was trying to attack him and get him out of the way when it bit him. That type of biting is not Shane. It's done with the teeth, but it's not Shane. Shane, teeth, is pleasurable. A horse biting somebody because it's annoyed is not pleasurable for the horse. The horse is doing it because it's angry at him. He doesn't intend on consuming the person. Even if the guy died immediately, the horse wouldn't consume him. Horses don't eat people. What do they call them? Herbivores, right? Horses are not carnivores. Right. They don't eat meat. Okay. So let's go. So this is still reviewing from yesterday. We have Karen, the father. We have the child that would be biting with the intention of inflicting harm, biting without pleasure. And that would be a child of Karen. However, it has the same laws as the father. Karen has its laws. Nishicha, biting, has the same laws as the father. Okay, so the children of Karen are just like Karen. We are the children different than the father. What children of these Nezikin, which we'll explain all the words in a moment. What children of the categories or subcategories? What subcategories are different than the category itself? Okay, so now we're at 4 lines to the bottom. Papa, Shane, and Regel. Papa is referring to Shane and Regel. Shane is the teeth, Regel is the feet. And again, these don't mean the actual teeth or feet. It means the category. Okay, Shane, Regel, Hefek, how do we know there's a conceptual framework? The Torah gives a specific set of laws of damages for Shane and Regel, for a foot and a tooth. So Gemara says, the Tanya we learned, Basically, the animal goes to a different field and he consumes. The shilach, the animal goes, zeh regel. This is referring to casual damage. And similarly, we find the regel, casual damage, feet, is typically used, is often associated with the word shalach. Regel hashar v'achamor. The sending of the feet of an ox or a donkey. Ubier, and it consumes, zu hashen. This is the teeth. And similarly, we find kasher yivar hagol atumai. There's two explanations here. Yivar means to consume. Hagolo. Gol can either mean that which is both hidden and revealed, like the teeth, which are often hidden and often revealed. Or gol could also refer to excrement, in which case the teeth, i.e., regular consumption, is the process by which excrement is produced. Okay. Amar. So we learned v'shilach zeh regel. Send it, the word v'shalach refers to regel. And similarly, we find the word regel is associated with mishalach regel shar v'chamor with the word shalach. Okay, because the Torah tells us that shalach refers to regel, if the Torah would not write v'shalach, if we would not know that v'shalach refers to regel, then how would we interpret this pasuk? Karen, if we're referring to Karen, the damage of the horn, ksiv, we already seen that yesterday, that the source of Karen, the word Karen is associated with the word negicha, or sometimes used as negifa. But in the Torah, they both mean the same thing. Okay. Ishain, if it's referring to Shane, ksiv, Shane, eating, is also written. That's ubiyar. So why do we need a pasuk to tell me that v'shalach refers to regel? I already know that there's nothing else it could refer to. So Gemara says it's your side of the chamina idi Shane. It could be that v'shalach and ubiyar are both referring to Shane, but there are two types of Shanes. Okay, so basically as follows. You have an animal that goes into somebody else's field before the stuff is ripe. So it's sort of mid-season. The animal goes in and it consumes all the let's say it's a fruit tree. It consumes all the young apples. Now, because it's in the middle of the season, what's going to happen? All the apples will grow back. But because it's in the middle of the season, it won't grow back as it was before. So therefore, we need two psukim to say. One, tell you that Shane is chayev when it's mechal yikarno, when it destroys the principle. That would be when it goes into the hay, the store that sells hay, the barn, and it starts eating the hay. That hay will never reproduce again. It's hay in a barn. It's not connected. And another pasuk would tell me that you're chayev and Shane when you consume from a tree. When you consume from a tree, that it will regrow again. Obviously, not as much as it would have before. So you'll have to pay the difference in damage, but at least it will regrow. So Kamash Malon that no, the pasuk is referring to regel and not Shane. Okay, well, hold on a second. How do you know that you're chayiv on Shane when you didn't destroy the principle? When you ate from a bush or tree, but that bush or tree is going to regrow. So Gemara says, "Do me the regel. My regulation mechai kind of relation le mechai kind of afshein relation mechai kind of relation le mechai kind of." Just like with regard to casual damage, there's no reason to presume there's a difference between mechai kind or not. In other words, if an animal goes into a blueberry farm, right, and it just casually tramples a bunch of blueberry bushes, and all the fruit on the tree, which is young and not ripe yet, it's all wrecked, and maybe the tree is partially wrecked too, But again, there's no intention to damage. It's just an animal walking through what it thinks is a trampleable area. Just like over there, it doesn't make a difference. The fact that it will regrow makes no difference. Of course, you're chayav. There's no reason to differentiate a casual damage between the type of casual damage. If you're talking about the animal consuming, so you can argue again, the category of Shane is pleasurable, and you could say that and that's because the food is being consumed. Whereas by regel, the food is not being consumed; the animal's just doing damage, and it makes no difference whether that damage is sort of permanent or temporary. And the different degradations of damage make no difference to the conceptual framework of the damage. Therefore, Shane, it doesn't either make a difference whether the animal eats and destroys when it eats, or whether it eats but it will regrow a little bit later.
Yep.
Now we ask the same question on the flip side. Omar ubir, and it consumes zu Shane. This refers to Shane. That Shane is associated with consumption. Okay, so now we know that kasha yavar means Shane. But if not, what is Shane referring to? I'm sorry, what is, okay, in other words, if we didn't know that ubir was Shane, what would we think that ubir means? Karen, if it's referring to Karen, ksiv. We already know that Karen exists because Karen is associated with the word kiyigach, negicha. Regel, if referring to regel, which is casual damage, the feet. So ksiv, it already says regel. That's the first part of the pasuk. Shilach. So Gemara says it's necessary. I would think idvidia regel. Both v'shilach and ubir are both referring to regel. Okay, this is another important distinction. With regard to regel, trampling an animal, regel is casual damage. So the animal we'll soon see, I believe regel is exempt in a public domain. And the reason for this is very logical. If you're, look in the old pictures of New York in the 1910s, right? There's peddlers and there's buggies, and there's horse and buggies and donkey carts running down the street. And if you're in a public, so obviously, generally speaking, you look at the old pictures, there was a sort of a designated area for the animals, for the hustle ball, the people to travel, and there was an area for the peddlers to sell on the sides.
Right.
But generally speaking, if you're in an area where animals could be moving, it's your responsibility to be careful, because an animal is certainly not going to be careful. He's an animal, it's an animal. It just moves, and if it's going to casually trample your stuff, well, you better be careful to make sure your stuff isn't in the way of potentially being trampled by an animal.
Or somebody else's stuff.
What do you mean?
I gotta be careful about trampling the other guy's stuff.
No, you don't have to. If you're in a public domain and you have an animal, and you can expect that the animal is going to behave like an animal. Yeah. It doesn't look where it steps. It can sometimes be a little bit rough and sometimes tear around. Be rough around the edges, quite literally.
Where the animal goes if you're around.
Not in a place where animals have a right to trample. Trample. I don't mean this with negative, with intention to damage. I mean in the sense that animals move, and this is a place where animals are going to move.
Okay.
If you're not careful, that's your fault.
This is a bull in a China.
Yeah. Well, the bull in the China shop, that would be a problem. But if the China shop goes to be a peddler, and sells his China on the street, it's really his fault. He shouldn't have brought it there.
If you jump on the highway 5 during Russia,
yeah.
You could get trampled. Jump on the highway 5 accidentally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so basically, that's one of the distinct. Okay, now with regard to regel, so regel here is going to be where somebody went into territory that they didn't belong in the first place. So you didn't belong there, and you sent your animal anyway. Now there's a big difference here. Did your animal was your animal sent, or did it go on its own? Maybe the Torah only holds you liable if you sent your animal, either because you headed and it went, or maybe because you were leading the animal, or it was leading you and it was going on a trip with you. Shalach shluchei is much more logical to be chayev. When you're leading the animal, of course, you should be careful where you take your animal. But if the animal goes on its own, who says you're chayev for regel? Again, regel is casual damage. Why are you chayev for your animal just doing what it's supposed to be doing? Maybe you're only chayev if you've led the animal, but if you didn't lead it, you'd be exempt. So that's what we think. We need two sources. One to tell you shalach shluchei, one to tell you ozlam emela. Kamash malon that the one is shane and one is regel. Okay, well, if that's the case, the hashduk yashain, we're telling me that it's referring to shane. Okay, then regel to ozlam emela minolan. Then how do we know that you're chayev for regel when it goes on its own, when you're not there leading it? How do you know that? How do you know you'd be liable in that scenario as well? So Gemara says, "Do me the shane, similar to shane." Ma shane loish shalosh shluchi loish to ozlam emela. Regel loish shalosh shluchi loish to ozlam emela. With regard to shane, consumption, it makes no difference whether you tell the animal to eat or whether it eats on its own. And obviously, the reason here is because an animal is going to eat, right? You don't need to tell it to eat. There is no distinction really. You don't have to push your animal into the food. most animals, if you offer them food and they're, even a minorly hungry, they'll eat.
Yeah.
So obviously there would be no distinction between shalosh shluchin and azlam memela. And therefore, just like Shane doesn't have that distinction, Regel doesn't either. Okay. Okay, let's use the word just v'shalach and not write the word ubir. V'shalach, he sent his animal to a different field. Why does it have to say he consumed? Why? Because v'shalach, and he sent his animal, the mashma regel or mashma shein. The word shalach could refer to regel, casual damage, umashma shein, pleasurable damage. Mashma regel, the word regel is often associated with the word shalach because, like we said before, mishalach regel sharvach hamor. Umashma shein, and it could also mean shein, d'chsiv v'shein behemis ashalach bam. Teeth of animals, I will send them. Meaning that we see here, shein is also used in terms of sending, shalach. So maybe the verse v'shalach is referring to both shein and regel. So Gemara says, one second, ilav kra, if not for a verse, if not for the both v'shalach and a beer, havamina, I would think, I regel to hazeka matzin. Either it would be regel, because regel has hazeka matzin. Regel is a very common type of damage, as you might expect, right? Regel is casual damage. It's damage that happens just because an animal is an animal and doesn't really, doesn't carry a glass like human beings carry glass. I would think Shane Diashan Allah Zeka. Shane has pleasure to the damage that it does. So Moses 1 second. Mechti, Shkulanhain. Fundamentally, if we had only one verse, there's no reason why we should say that regel is included over Shane. Because each of them have what we call tzad chomer, a reason that would imply that that this is a type of damage that should be included, either because it's a common type of damage, or because the animal derives pleasure. So they're effectively equal. Each one has its own tzad chomer. If that's the case, shkulanhain, they're equal. The yavayu shneim, the haimin ayam afkas. They both should be learned from the same verse. Why do we need two psukim? So Gemara says it's One second.
Page position, please.
Just give me a second. Where are we? At the two dots, about 2/3 of the way down the page.
2/3 way down the page.
The first one line is Kamash Malan. I would think that maybe there's sort of a distinction between if the animal sent or whether it goes on its own. What does it mean sent in the context of Shane? In other words, in the context of an animal
Told how to
engaging in pleasurable damage, i.e., eating something that doesn't belong to the owner, maybe there'd be a difference because maybe it's possible for the owner to send the animal to go into a field that isn't his. That would be sort of a distinction within Shane, even though it's a relatively minor distinction, because generally speaking, Shane, it doesn't require the owner to actually send it. But maybe we would limit, if we only had one source, we would limit Shane to that distinction. Shane would be limited where the owner deliberately sent the animal to consume something in a field that did not belong to him. So Kamash Malan, that's why the Torah repeats it twice. Tell me that there's no such distinction. Whether you're leading the animal or whether you're not leading the animal, if it goes into somebody else's field, you're chayav both on Shane and for regel. Okay, Toldo the Shane Mahi. What are the children of Shane? What are the subcategories? So Shane obviously is pleasurable damage. The animal derives pleasure by eating. Okay, what are the children of that? Similar but not necessarily with the teeth. So this would be Shane without teeth. It's in the category of Shane, but it has nothing to do with eating. So Nischacha b'koisel lahan also. It wants a massage on the wall. It sort of rubs itself against the wall. Apparently, this is a thing. I was once in a dairy farm, and they have like this masseuse machine. No kidding. After the animals get milked, they line up in this masseuse machine, and it rubs their back. So apparently, this is a thing. So the animal basically was rubbing against the wall, and sure enough, it knocked down the wall. Or v'tin for Paris lahan also. It saw some fruits and decided to sort of lie down on it. What is the principle of Shane? Yesh hanola hazeka. There is benefit, it's pleasurable for the animal to lie on top of a bunch of fruits. And it belongs to you. The animal belongs to you. You're obligated to watch it. Haninami, these children also the same thing. Yesh hanolad, they can they belong to you, you're obligated to watch. El told the Shane. Okay, so the children of Shane, these would be pleasurable damages that are not done with the teeth, are exactly like teeth, exactly like eating. Papa, what's your papa referring to? I told the regal, the children of regal. So the Gemara says, hold on, told the regal mai. What is told the regal? So what's regal? Regal we said is casual damage. Damage that the animal does sort of in the course of regular normal behavior. Whereas Karen is unusual behavior. Karen is behavior of an animal that's mad, that's deliberately trying to inflict damage. Regal is casual. Animal is completely calm. So told the regal mai. What's the children of regal? Hezika begufa derech hilucha. So basically, the animal was walking, and instead, so regal, the most common example of regal would be with the feet. So the animal tramples in something, it steps in something, it breaks it. That's typical casual damage. But you can also have a similar situation when the animal's walking and the body of the animal sort of smacks into something casually. Or besira darachilucha, the hair of the animal got caught onto something, and that thing broke because it was caught onto the animal. It was being walked through town. B'shlif shalal, the saddle that was on it got caught onto something. The prum yishavipia, the bit that was on it. B'zug shavitzavar, the yoke that was on its neck. It also got caught onto something and it broke something else. Casual damage. Okay, Maishna regal, what's the common denominator? Regal is hezeka motzi. Regal is common type of damage. Casual type of thing. When Meinchap belongs to you, and you're obligated to watch it. Haninami, all these examples are the same. They're not with the feet, but they're the same principles as regal. Haninami is zeken motzi. They're very common types of damages. In other words, they're casual. When they're your money and you have to watch it, and therefore you're chayiv. I'll tell the regal, the children of regal are like regal. Okay. What's your papa referring to? I told the bor, the children of the pit. So bor is where you dig a pit, and somebody or an animal falls in. Okay, we'll get to a lot of the details of bor later. For now, whatever the Gemara talks about, we'll briefly mention. Whatever is not spoken about, we'll get to when we discuss the damages of bor. Okay, the question obviously is what's the child of bor? So the Gemara's first position is okay, bor has some very interesting features. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to understand why certain types of damages of bor you're chayav or potter, you're liable or exempt for. It's not the easiest thing to understand. But what I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it again, is that it's important to understand that bor is the most difficult type of damage to understand in the first place. Bor, you're the least involved in the damage. You dig a pit, you didn't do anything. As a matter of fact, you might not even own the pit. You dig a pit in a public place, you come with your backhoe, you dig a hole in the ground right in front of the shul. You don't own the hole. You don't own the street. You're just a guy with a backhoe digging a hole. And all of a sudden, if somebody falls in, you have to pay for it. What do I have to pay for it? What did I do? It's not my money. That would be sure, right? Maybe even Aish. It's not my actions. That would be Adam. That would be Aish also. What does it have to do with me?
Dug it in a public thoroughfare.
So
the outcome is inevitable.
But how does it connect to me?
You dug it.
Okay.
You created the hazard.
Okay, so it's more than just yes. Okay, so basically we'll see more about this later, but you created the hazard. Okay, so by creating the hazard, you sort of own the damages. So like I said yesterday, it's sort of it's the inverse of an ox. Right? It's the ox, you own the thing and it actually goes ahead and does damage. Over here, you own the thing that causes the damage, but you didn't do the damage. Who did the damage? The guy who fell in, or the animal that fell in, whatever else fell in for that matter. That caused its own demise. Right? An animal causes its own demise by jumping into a pit or falling into it, whatever it is. But because you created a vehicle of damage, you sort of own it, and not only do you own it, you own the damage that other people caused to themselves by falling in. It's the least severe of any of the types of damages. And that's why we'll see there's a lot of interesting exceptions and a lot of discussion about bor. Bor is, I'd say, one of the more complicated ones to understand, but I guess one of the principles you can use is that bor is the least logical of all the types of damages. It's the least the damage is the least connected to you. It's the most difficult to draw a direct connection between what happens in the pit and me. Okay, so let's give some suggestions here. Ilema Av Yehudah told the tests. So we know the rabbis taught 10 tefachim. Would that be? That's about 30 inches, roughly speaking. On the conservative side, it's a little bit more on the more expansive side. And it takes about 30 inches or a little bit more to kill the total tests. And the child is 9. 9 could only do damages. 9 won't kill. So in other words, if an animal dies in a pit that's 9 tefachim deep, you're exempt. Because that sort of doesn't kill. It's probably a problem with the animal, not a problem with you. Okay, so just 1 second. 9 isn't written in the pasuk, and neither is 10. So the Gemara says, that's not difficult. It says that something falls into a pit, and the dead body belongs to the guy to the one who owns the body. In other words, this is always a question. So you have a dead body. Dead body is worth something. A dead ox, healthy dead ox, worth a lot of money, especially if it died from a bar, right? So you basically smashed its head. The rest of the meat is perfectly usable. So you can take it to the market and you can sell the meat. Who has to deal with trafficking the meat? Who has to sell it? We'll see. Typically, it's the one who received the damage. We'll call it the nizik. Bailam Tapam been available. We'll get to it and we'll discuss it. Anyway, but clearly here the Torah is referring to the dead body. Okay. The Kimmel Rabbanon and the rabbis know this is sort of a tradition they had. Yud Avdin Misa Test Nazakin. 10 kills, 9 does damage. Test Nazakin Avdi Misa Avdi. 9 does not kill. So the Gemara says safe. It doesn't make a difference. 10 Ze Avla Misa. That's the father of death. And 9 is the father of damages without death. So they're not. Let's go back. Karen, what's Karen? Karen is the horn. What's a toll of the Karen? Where it bites. So the father is the horn. That's Karen means a horn. The child is where it does the same category of damage, but a different method. So it's the same category, i.e. intention to harm. And how is it done? Not with the horn, it's done by biting. Obviously, this is biting without the intention to consume. Over here, it's the same pit. The question is, how deep is it? Is it 9 or is it 10? So 10, that's the father of death. 9 is the father of damages. Or really less than 10. So it's not a tolda, it's not a child, it's the same thing. It's just a different category within the same. It's different types of damages, but it's not a tolda, it's not a child. Okay, so here's the child. Okay, so you have you have a rock on top of a knife, a heavy thing on top to make sure it doesn't blow with the wind. And sure enough, they blew with the wind and they ended up in public domain. So this is the child of bar. Bar means what? A pit. Over here, it's not a pit. It's a dangerous item in the public domain. Okay. So what's the scenario? If he made it hefker, he made it ownerless. So the Shmuel Hainu bar. This is the classical instance of bar. Bar, you don't actually own the bar, right? You don't own the pit. You don't necessarily own the pit. The reason is because you dig the pit, we consider it yours with regard to the damages that come from it. But you don't actually own it. Together? Just turn to the top of 3B. Give on the base, top of the page.
Like you dug it on somebody else's property, so you technically don't.
You dug it in public property. Dug a public pit. It's not yours. Dig a pothole. It's not yours. But the Torah says, no. You dug it. You're responsible for it. We treat it as if it's yours with regard to the responsibility of damages. Okay, either after and if you actually own, in other words, so this guy has the knife that goes flying into the public domain. If he says I make it ownerless, we say, well, yeah, appreciate that. Whoever wants to take it will take it. But if it does damages, it doesn't make a difference. You put a damage in the public domain, you're chayev, you're liable, just like a bar. If it's still yours, according to Shmuel, this is considered a pit, even though you don't own it, because there's some pits that you don't have to own. And we'll get to this debate at a later point. This is a Daf Ches is a big sugya. And according to Rav, this is considered your ox because you own it. Okay, well, we'll discuss the specifics of this debate on Daf Ches. We'll get to it again in Daf Vav in a few days, and then Daf Ches is the sugya. Okay. Okay, Maishna bar. What's the difference between bar? The key feature of bar is that as soon as you open it, it has the potential to do damage. It's your money and you're obligated to watch it. A knife in a public domain is clearly a hazard, and you're chayev. You're potentially chayev for it. You're obligated to watch it, and if it does damage, you're chayev. Al told the bar kabar. The children of bar have the same laws as bar itself, as the pit. What is Rapapa referring to? I told the mava. Rapapa is referring to the children of mava. Now, what is mava? Okay. Now, again, this is a debate we'll see again a little bit later, but we'll start now. What is mavis? In the Mishnah, I did not tell you what mava is. Obviously, this is why. What is it? What is mava? Ila shmuel the amar mava zushain. We'll discuss this sort of at the end of the page, really tomorrow. According to Shmuel, mava is shein. So shar is either keren or regel. We'll see that in the Gemara. And mava refers to shein. Shein means pleasurable consumption. The animal eats. That's what mava is. So hakim that we have already established told the shein kashain. The children of shein are like shein. Okay. Ila Rav, according to the opinion of Rav, the amar mava zeh adam. Mava refers to man, right? We said this is the most logical of all the damages. Adam amazik, assault. So you damage something or you destroy something, you're chayev. That's what mava is. So my told us this way. What are the fathers and children that there are in a person? As a person, but it doesn't make a difference. The Torah never says you have to use your hands to hit. You use your feet to kick. It's all a person who's doing damage. So what is the child of a person doing damage? Keren, we say, is the horn. The child is biting, right? Regel, we say, is typically with the feet, but it could also happen, if something gets hooked onto the saddle and just gets destroyed that way. So that would be a child. But what's the child of a person? It's all a person doing it. My told this, or maybe you'll say a father, that's when a person's awake. Told her what's the child? Yashim, when he's sleeping. Vatnan, we learned Adam word lo'ilam. Person is always liable. Bain er, bain yashin, even if he's sleeping. He should have been careful where he went to sleep. If he went to sleep in a position where he could have easily damaged something, that's his fault. Right? Somebody's always broken their glasses because they slept too close to it, right? Should have been careful. They put it somewhere else instead of sleeping right next to your glasses. Okay, ela akicha v'niyai. Okay, perhaps it means if he spit or he sneezed, if the damage was caused by making something, let's say, went into a cup and obviously not quite drinkable at that point. Person sneezes right inside somebody else's cup. You're not gonna drink that. So did the damage as it was going, that's his action. If what happened was he sneezed and sort of after it sneezed, if it fell, rolled over onto something. So then Hainu Bur, this is Bur. He created a potential. So he sneezed, and then I guess it was a large sneeze, and stuff rolled into a cup of milk or something, and now it's obviously no longer consumable. Then if it's not directly his actions, then it's his Bur. It's pit that he made. Dangerous item. I'll told him okay. So the child of a person who does damages is just like himself. The same thing with Shane. Told the Mava, whatever Mava is, the child of Mava is exactly like the father. Papa told the Eish, the child of Eish. So I told the Eish mine. What's the child of fire? Ilema, if you'll say Avne Sakine Masoy, Shnichem Bersh Gaga V'Nofel Baruch Matsuya V'Zikum. So what happened? The guy puts the knife with a stone and a heavy thing on top. Okay, what happens? A regular wind blew. It wasn't a hurricane. There was no firestorm winds. Regular wind blew, and it blew it off his roof. So it's a what happens? If it does damages as it's traveling, it's a hainu esh. This is a regular fire. No, well, meaning this is the child of a fire. It's not a fire. But just like a fire is liable because you sent a damaging agent, that would be the fire. So too, you basically lit a fire in your house. The fire, instead of here being an actual fire, this was a bunch of dangerous items, right? It was a rock and a knife, and just like when you lit your campfire, you weren't careful enough, and there was a forest fire because the wind blew, and it was a regular wind, and it blew, and all of a sudden the whole forest was on fire. Here too, a regular wind blew off whatever you put down to keep it, whatever you put on it to weigh it down. The wind blew it off, and your thing did damage as it was traveling. That's Aish, that's a fire. It's a tolda of Eish, it's a child of Eish, because it's not actually a fire, but it has the same laws as Eish. We'll explain. Ma'ishna Eish. What's the idea of Eish, of a fire? The koyach achar ma'orben. Like we pointed out yesterday, Eish has another force inside of it. Eish is really where you're controlling another power. Right? We said there's really two explanations in Eish, whether Eish in Shemamayna or Eish in Shemchitzav. Is Eisha because it's an arrow, or Eisha because it's your ox? Okay, so one that we'll keep out now out of this discussion. One explanation of Eish is Eish Shemamayna, meaning an Eish is sort of a virtual ox. Remember when I was in biology class, I asked the teacher why fire, it fits all the definitions of a living thing. It said that it doesn't have a cell, right? It's the only thing it lacks. It maintains homeostasis. It has metabolism. It processes things. It doesn't have cells though.
Doesn't have cells.
A fire doesn't have cells. It can't be a living thing.
Oh, okay.
The definition of a living thing is cells.
Oh,
Okay. That's how you exclude a fire. But a fire really it's like an ox in a certain sense. It just doesn't have cells, right? It's your thing. It has an act. It's sort of a process that goes on, and there's two explanations why you're chayav in fire. If you're a fire, you light a campfire. You're not careful. It burns down a forest. Why are you chayav? One interpretation is it's like an ox. If you have an ox that goes out, your fire is your money. It's a virtual ox, and it does damage like a virtual ox would do damage, and that's why you're chayav.
So, Mave, I'm so confused. Is Mave a Kanav?
So Mav is an Ab. The question is, what does Mav refer to? Either Mav refers to Shane or refers to Adam. If it refers to Shane, we've already established that the children of Shane are exactly like the father.
Okay.
So that can't be an example that Papa says where the children are different than the father. So that's not a good example. The second possibility is that Mav is a person, Adam Amazik. The question is, what's the children of a person? First of all, we haven't found any children of a person. There are no children. Anytime a person does damages, he's chayav. So there's no children to speak of. Okay. Now we get to Eish, the child of Eish. What's the child of Eish? So the child of Eish is this rock with a knife that goes flying and hits somebody. Now the second explanation of Eish is really is an arrow. So in other words, in an arrow, if you shoot an arrow at somebody or at anything really, a beer can, and it pops at your chayav. Right? Why are you chayav? Because you released a controlled force in a specific direction. That would be the same thing as Eish. What? Yeah. Well, yeah, sort of. Where you're sending another power. The same thing is true with Avnei Sakinim Asah. You put the knife on the roof, and the wind blows it, and it hits somebody while it's blowing. It hits somebody while it's traveling. Okay. That is Eish. It's a fire. Why? Because Ma'ashin Eish the koyach achar ma'orben. It has another force with it. Right, the force of fire, and as you aren't the fire, you control a force called fire, and it's considered your money because you started the fire, which you're obligated to watch it. Haninami. So with regard to the this rock, it's your money. It's your knife, it's your rock, and it belongs to you. You're obligated to watch it. And there was another force involved in hurting somebody, the wind that blew it. So you're chayav. I'll told the Eish Keish. Told the child of Eish, of the fire, is exactly like a fire. Same set of laws. Papa, I told the Regel. Papa is referring to the child of Regel. When it says Regel, the child of Regel, Hawk Himna, we've already established that told the Regel Regel. The child of Regel is exactly like Regel. So Gemara says, B'chatzi nezek tzreros. The damage caused by tzreros. So this is a very interesting exception. What is chatzi nezek tzreros? If an animal goes ahead and kicks a stone casually, and that stone breaks something else, that's called tzreros. Tzror literally means a stone. And we have a halacha l'moshe in Sinai that in this case of casual damage, you only have to pay half the damage. So we have a child of regel. A child of regel normally is when an animal stomps on something, breaks it as it's walking with its feet. The child is where it while it's walking, it kicks a rock, and that rock goes ahead and hits something else. And over here, the child is not like the father. The child makes a half payment, and the father makes a full payment. Regular payment for regel. If your animal casually damages somebody else's stuff, you pay full damages. Whereas with a pebble, if it kicks a pebble, it only pays half the damages. The Gemiri law, that's the halacha l'moshe Sinai. That's an accepted tradition. There's not necessarily a reason behind it. But my Kollel told of the regal. Why is it called a child of regal then? The Gemara says l'shalom min ha'aliyah. Again, we'll get into this concept later on in much more extensive detail. But let's say it basically as follows: if an animal gores with Karen, the maximum payment is no more than the value of the animal itself. That payment is called migufay. You could pay no more than the value of the animal. So if you have a very, very poor animal or a very wild one that's not worth too much money, your maximum payment is the value of that animal that you have. Even though the damage is did by goring, it wrecked the house. I don't know. Did $100,000 of damage, it's only worth 500. Maximum payment is 500. But that's only with regard to Karen, which is intentional damage. With regard to regular casual damage, there's no limitation of migufay. You pay as much as the damage is worth.
Intentional damage, you pay less.
So when an animal intentionally damages, that's considered abnormal behavior.
Okay.
Because it's behavior that it's very hard to anticipate. We'll discuss this.
Okay.
This is like a long discussion. How is whatever. This is an extensive discussion. There's a whole parak on this. This is a lot of the Masechta will be discussing the differences between why intentional damage has its own status.
Okay.
And we'll discuss it at length. But basically, because it's considered abnormal to some extent, it's less predictable, and therefore the Torah exempts you from half the payment, and it limits the total payment to no more than the value of your animal.
Is the dead animal or the
So for example, let's say two animals of equal value kill each other, or whatever. One kills the other abnormally. So the owner of the killer animal pays half the value of the other animal. Let's say they're both worth $1,000. He pays $500. Let's say the other animal is the winner of the what's that thing called when they sell the animals? The auction. When they have these fairs, so the winner of the fair is like that's like the best animal.
Right.
It's $2,000 animal. Kills the $1,000 animal, kills a $2,000 animal. It's $1,000. Kills a $5,000 animal. What's the total payments? $1,000. The value of the animal, the killing animal.
It's value of the dead animal.
The value of the animal that did the damage.
Yeah, value.
Value
Not
of
the animal that's
Not based on the dead animal, but on the
the
live
so it's based on the live animal, but the maximum payment is the value of the killing animal. The animal that did the damage is the maximum payments, and the normal payment would be half the value of the animal that was damaged, or it doesn't have to be an animal; it could be anything, it could be a house. Okay, let's just finish up here and we'll stop. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Vami boy Rava." Rava wasn't so sure about this. Rava asked it as a question. The boy Rava asked, "Katzin has its roris megufay mishalom. I mean aliyah mishalom. Do you pay megufay of the value, no more than half the value of the animal that caused the damage, or do you pay me'aliyah, the total value of the damage itself, or half the value of the damage itself, even if it exceeds the value of the damaging animal?" So Gemara says, "The Rava mi boy le Papa pshitale." According to Rava, it was a question. According to Papa, it was obvious. So Gemara says, "The Rav and Mibayle, am I Kollel told it to Regel? Why is Tzroiris called the child of Regel? In what way is Tzroiris common to Regel? If anyway, the payment isn't limited by Migufay, according to Rava. The payment it seems much more closer to Karen than Regel. So Gemara says, no, it's similar to Regel. The Paicher B'Shasaram, Regel casual damage is exempt in the public domain. Why? Because animals have a right to be there, and therefore it's the responsibility of anybody who has anything they don't want animals to damage to be careful of their stuff in the public domain. And Tzroiris has the same rule. If an animal kicks pebbles in the public domain and hits something else, the owner of the animal is exempt. Okay, have a great day.